difficult to ignore what's happening. As I mentioned, Jonathan Krause is going to be speaking with Patrick DeHaan with Gas Buddy later during his show about these gas prices. He has been predicting a double spike week, both in conjunction with what is taking place in Iran, as well as what's been taking place at a refinery in Indiana. Kind of a cumulative effect there that a lot of people need to be paying attention to here. We haven't even seen these prices hit the grocery stores yet, because if you haven't heard, diesel gas trucks drive our groceries and so many other materials where they need to go, and as a result, we're going to see those prices reflected in the groceries too. We played earnings calls of Delta CEOs about 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about how they've already, in anticipation of increased prices, raised their prices even higher than they already were. And even if gas prices went down, they said as long as people are willing to pay it, they're going to keep those prices exactly where they are. And the list goes on and on and on. We are reaching a point of economic turmoil that I think is going to be very difficult to avoid. And I think it's the flagrant nature in which this administration, yes, the Democratic Party in 2022 referred to inflation as transitory. They said people talking about corporate greed were conspiracy theorists. They said Joe Biden wasn't slipping. They had all of these shortcomings in regards to what their party was actually, why their party was actually doing the best that they could. But it's the cavalier nature in which the cost of living under the Trump administration is actually starting to get under my skin. There hasn't been a whole lot done in the way of legislation in this Republican trifecta. Of course, we got a massive tax cut for the rich, because why wouldn't we? Republicans are in charge. It's a day that ends in Y. Of course, that's what they're getting across the finish line. Like, at least during the Biden era, there was an effort to crack down on corporate greed within the oil and gas industry, but every single Republican in the House and Senate voted against it. There was an effort to crack down on overdraft fees, but every single Republican in the House and Senate voted against it. There were all of these random efforts that took place that are pretty difficult to ignore, but they were at least being made. It was milquetoast solutions. It wasn't addressing the obvious elephant in the room that is known as corporate greed, but there were these piecemeal options. But there really was there wasn't a mainline effort to address this. Since the big beautiful bill was passed by this Trump administration, other than making it hard for women to vote, there really hasn't been much of an effort to pass any kind of legislation related to everyday life. That is, of course, until April 29th, where the GOP has started discussing campaigning on, not only trying to pass it, but campaigning on passing a capital gains tax cut as their idea of addressing the cost of living ahead of inflation. So some of you may not know exactly how that works, and I have a little bit of data here in front of me that I think might actually help you out a little bit here to understand it. If a capital gains tax were to pass, 99% of the benefits of this capital gains tax would be felt by the top 20% of Americans. 1% of this capital gains tax would go to the bottom 80% of Americans. Now, you may be asking, Ben, that's a bit abstract. How exactly am I supposed to understand what that means? How should I know if I am in the top 20% that might accidentally benefit from this capital gains tax? Well, don't you worry, because I took some time to get to the bottom of that as well. Now, there's no consistent data on this. I've seen a range from $130,000 to $175,000 to include you in the top 20%. The average threshold has it at $153,000, $153,001, I should say. So that's the threshold to determine if you are in all likelihood going to feel that 99% of the impact of cutting the capital gains tax. So this Republican Party cut taxes for the rich, has done nothing else, has instituted tariffs and started technically an illegal war, but no more illegal than like most of the wars that have been started post World War II, but has started a pointless war that over almost 3/4 of Americans are absolutely opposed to, has done nothing to actually address corporate greed or the housing industry. And now they're saying, let's cut the capital gains tax to further benefit the wealthiest Americans in this nation while we are all suffering during a cost of living crisis. And here's the real kicker, and this is what ticks me off so much. Regular listeners of the show have heard me say this before. Debt and deficit spending is climate change for the Republican Party. Liberals will talk to you about climate change and the importance of addressing the ever warming planet, as we are on pace for the hottest year ever, actually, in 2026, which is just fantastic news for all parties involved. While talking out of one side of their mouths about climate change, they also will set the record for oil and gas drilling in 2023 and in 2024. They will slowly roll out renewable energy projects without actually really trying to crack down on this problem in any kind of meaningful way, and then turn around and campaign on it later. Republicans do the same thing about debt and deficit spending. Ron Johnson, our senator, will show up and try and convince people that now he is very concerned about debt and deficit spending when it comes to Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, SNAP benefits. But when it comes to increasing the military industrial complex budget by 44%, that will not be an issue for him. When it comes to cutting a massive deal for taxes for the wealthy, blowing a $4 trillion hole in our debt over the course of 10 years, he has no issues passing that legislation. And now we're going to go even further by trying to cut a capital gains tax. And they are so confident in being able to trick their voters with this that they are actually intending to campaign on this in the middle of a debt and deficit crisis and a cost of living crisis. Why do I call it a debt and deficit crisis? Because for the first time since the 40s, i.e., World War II, we officially have a debt that encompasses our entire GDP. So, in other words, we are currently living right now in the similar time period to when our debt skyrocketed because we were fighting a world war trying to push back against fascism. And right now, we are not doing anything like that. We are cutting taxes for billionaires. For those of you that have just tuned into this show for the first time today, because Lord knows if you've listened to me for more than 20 minutes, you've heard me say this before. Between 1945 and 1983, the tax rate was between 70 and 91%. The reason we had to jack it up that high to start with was to pay down that debt that occurred as a result of fighting a world war against fascism. And now this Republican Party, the Republican Party that claims to care so much about debt and deficit spending anytime it's about a social program that might accidentally benefit a Black person or a Mexican, now has no concerns about cutting massive tax cuts, cutting massive holes in our debt and deficit as we set records for this. And then we'll have the audacity to also try and run on it at the same time. It's an embarrassment to anybody that actually takes this seriously and is looking for some kind of consistency in government right now. So we have this oil and gas crisis that is just jacking up the prices everywhere. And by the way, as I've been highlighting, oil and gas companies are making an extra $30 million in profit every hour while we have, since the war in Iran has started. No one's cracking down on the corporate greed. Nobody has the guts to stand up to Donald Trump about starting this war that 7 in 10 Americans have stated that they are not in favor of. And we're going to be talking about the War Powers Act later on in the program and how they're kind of trying to use legalese to circumvent that right now. We have a debt and deficit that is continuing to balloon at record paces for no other reason other than we're trying to figure out if we can give billionaires all the money instead of just most of the money. And we have a Democratic Party that's so feckless that they don't even know how to campaign on this. These are very obvious problems. And the most frustrating thing is, having done this show since 2022, I've noticed the people that were very angry about Bidenflation and calling and interacting with this show every day have all of a sudden turned very quiet when it comes to calling out their orange dad president, and the fact that he has objectively made nothing better, is making things more expensive, causing more turmoil in foreign policy, and is making life all around worse, specifically worse than when Joe Biden was in office, and yet nobody has any comments about that. It's almost like the Democrats were maintaining an unacceptable status quo. Republicans are now dragging us further away from that status quo, and I'm willing to bet January 21, 2029, when Democrats have a trifecta again because everybody has lost faith in this administration, one day into the presidency, the same people that have been fairly quiet about Trump's failings are going to be blaming the Democrats for not being able to pull us out of it fast enough. And the reason I know this is we're already watching it happen in New York. I have a segment planned for later today as well about how social media has essentially become unusable for a number of different reasons, one of which is the obvious coordination of messaging. And there was a stretch of time 2 days ago where I did not see a single post on Twitter about anything other than the fact that Zohran Mamdani was about to pass his second massive tax on wealthy people in order to combat deficit spending in New York City. Allow me to fill you in a little bit more on that. When Zohran Mamdani inherited the office, when he won the role, there was a $12 billion deficit for New York spending. In 4 months, the guy passes a 1% tax on a $5 million second home that billionaires don't live in, and is now looking to reduce the pass-through tax in New York by 25%. Those two moves are projected to raise roughly $5.5 billion, ultimately resulting in still having a $6.5 billion deficit that they're going to need to figure out how to work through, but basically cutting it in half only by taxing the wealthiest people in New York City in an effort to try and rein in that spending. It is also not lost on me that the NYPD's budget costs more than a lot of countries' defense spending. So there's probably quite a bit of bloat and excess waste, fraud, and abuse there as well. But of course, you don't want to be accused of defunding the police, so they're cracking down on the wealthiest people living in the state. And every single post that I saw said, well, looks like the socialist is running out of other people's money and needs to tax more. We told you this platform is wrong. He quite literally inherited the problem, and people are running it up the flagpole, and you're watching the Waka Waka MAGAs fall in line like the trained seals that they are, pretending that there is some relevance to this argument. And I am already mentally preparing for that to happen on the national scene as we progress through this, as Donald Trump continues ruining one thing after another in the government. There will be people frustrated that Democrats don't put it back together in 14 days. And I am prepared for those conversations. Not going to make excuses for feckless milquetoast behavior, but I'm also not going to pretend it hasn't gotten quiet as a mouse on the Donald Trump making things more expensive front, on the cost of gas front, on the fill in the blank front of whatever people were complaining about during the Biden administration. But as I mentioned before, at least they're cracking down on DEI practices in Florida. So it might cost you more to drive there, but at least you won't see as many black people and LGBTQ people working there, which apparently, according to MAGA, is a win. I definitely take this movement seriously. I think we should continue doing so. Jerry just simply says, stop it. It's the big ugly bill. It's the billionaire kiss ass bill. It's whatever you want to call it. Tom out in Freedom says, just a question about the threat that Fox News Jesse Waters made to the Queen when he asked her, did you enjoy the beehive? She said it was fine. Nobody got stung. He said that if the bees don't get you, the guns will. Wouldn't that be a serious threat if James Comey said the same thing to her? Of course, this is sarcasm to make a point about the double standard of free speech. Oh yeah, it's embarrassing how much people want to pretend that this double standard isn't existing. Like I said, I have an hour and a half. I don't want to go down this pipeline because I have a bunch of stories that I want to jump into today. Seriously, listen to my Wednesday episode. I kind of cover it all there. Ben says, have you ever admitted to a Republican inheriting some crap from a Democrat? Ben, here's the simple problem with your philosophy here. Joe Biden inherited a pandemic. It was nobody's fault. I am not putting anything about what Joe Biden inherited on Donald Trump. I'd actually argue some of the packages that Donald Trump passed during COVID are some of the best parts of his presidency, in my opinion. That is the ultimate truth, though. When Joe Biden had high oil and gas prices, it's because during the pandemic, there was no demand for gasoline. So they cut the prices way low. Then we opened back up and there was a massive demand for oil and gas and there wasn't enough supply to go around yet. So they jacked the prices up. Then there was a war in Ukraine that started up. All of this is relevant. But from 2022 until 2025, everything was trending downwards. Someone just asked me who I stand for in TikTok. What am I supposed to say? Jesus? I'm quoting Marvel, by the way. I don't stand for anybody. I hate both parties equally, but this MAGA movement is absolutely embarrassing right now. Go back and listen to old episodes of my show. You can catch up. My point is this. Crime hit a peak in 2020. Under the Trump years. It trended downward every single year during the Biden years and continues trending downwards during the Trump years. And Republicans are going to pretend like it only started in 2025 and wasn't obviously headed in that direction the entire time. Gas prices were headed down. Gas prices right now are more expensive than they were in 2024 when the campaign was about gas prices, solely because Donald Trump unilaterally moved to start a war in Ukraine on the behest of Israel, which is raising our prices. Inflation trended downwards to 2 to 3%. Doesn't mean corporate greed was being addressed, but the inflation was down. Now they are saying it is going to trend back upwards, not because of a pandemic out of everybody's control, not because of circumstances taking place in Europe, but because of one man's moves. We have government agencies going underfunded. The National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to help employees push back against corrupt big businesses. The Consumer Financial Protections Bureau is getting gutted, which is supposed to prevent against people getting gouged or exploited or not being delivered on what they were promised by a company or organization. And inevitably, a Democrat is going to take back over. And when they do not fix all of these problems in 2 months, you're going to say, see, this is why we have to vote third party, while completely glossing over the fact that we are in this position because of one orange moron and the fact that people are too scared to highlight that voted for him, that his presidency is an abject failure. This is what the issue is here. Then the Democrats can show up and say, Ben, why are you being so hard on us? Did you see what the last guy did and what he set us up with? How do you expect us to be able to fix this? And for those of you listening that have not listened to my speech that is on my YouTube channel, go listen to it. And I said, if Donald Trump showed us one thing, it's that one crazy person can show up and remake the entire government in his image, which means that somebody can show up and remake it in their image and not in an objectively trash way in every possible semblance of an idea, other than, of course, damn Mexicans crossing the border, which I can't stress enough I couldn't possibly care less about. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. I'm laughing. Thank you very much. This is Brian from Fremont.
Don't mention it. What's on your mind?
Well, I love it because you're saying exactly what I wanted to get on with is, I wake up this morning, I turn on my radio, I'm happy, I got my coffee, I'm traveling, we're on our way home, everything's good. And then I go to my feeds and I'm reading about how Hexeth is telling us that we're winning the war. No facts, just we're kicking their asses, we're doing great, life is good, keep it going. And then Trump, what day it is, totally everything that's out of his mouth, you can't believe it. And today, after 7 years, they found a suicide note. Can you believe that? After 7 years, they found a suicide note for Epstein.
Honest to God, man, right?
What can you believe anymore? So I go on the feeds and people are praising the stock market's up. We got a new end of the war delivered today. End of the war treaty delivered today. So that's Friday. We have so many problems that are you had just touched on it. Broken things. UAE pulled out of OPEC. Our treasuries are not being bought by foreign countries anymore. We pretty much alienated every ally we have. But you're exactly right. I wanted to say, amen, brother. If one guy can make this big of a mess, one person can pull it together. But it's going to have to be somebody not like Booker, not like any of the usual people. We need somebody new and somebody that is completely logical and taking care of the American interest first. So
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I appreciate the call, man. And I think it's spot on. And you talk about the stock market and record highs. I said during the Biden era, stock market has no true impact on what it's like to be an everyday working class American. The idea that people still try and flaunt these numbers in front of you and pretend like it counts. And what pisses me off is that when Democrats are in office, the stock market counts. When Republicans are in office, the stock market counts. But when the other guys are in office, oh, well, that means actually it's just a misrepresentation and they're just lying to you about it. And it's enough to break me because I actually take this seriously and it seems like everybody else is just playing a red team, blue team game. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben.
What's up, Dave?
Where's the respect from the politicians to the average citizen or average everyday blue-collar worker? You have to go back to like Walter Cronkite, who was a managing director of his news program, the CBS News, back in the 60s. He issued a commentary one day about the Vietnam War, and it was significant because he had clout in the game. He was managing director, producer, director, whatever of his news source, his program. When was the last time a news anchor did any worthwhile commentary saying, hey, enough of this crap with all the lying? Sorry for that word, but
good.
I mean, they're lying to us constantly, both sides. I'm not going after Republicans or Democrats. I'm going after both of them. I mean, they put the word honorable Heseth and everybody else when they're at these hearings. We used to be taught to write to them and say honorable such and such senator. Should we really be saying honorable to these guys? They don't honor us back.
And I said, Dave, on Wednesday, and for the record, I'm not calling for any kind of violence here, but I said Lindsey Graham is saying we need $400 million for this ballroom, not just for Donald Trump, but so that all future presidents are safe. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. We have to live through shootings every day. We're living in the specter of violence every single day, whether it's literal gun violence or corporate violence by making life unaffordable for so many people. And they think we really give two craps, as you said, about whether or not they feel safe doing their job or not. They think that's high on our priority list. And I don't know if they're doing that to troll. I don't know if they're doing that because they know they're gerrymandered into safe seats and they don't need to worry about answering for this dumbassery. But what I can tell you is this. No, they're not honorable anymore. We do not hold them in this high regard, and I think they're going to need to come to grips with that. And I appreciate the call, and you're exactly right. Look, I got John, Doug, and a crap ton of YouTube comments here. I'm going to get everybody involved. We do have to squeeze a break in here. I've been talking for about 30 minutes straight, so let's get a commercial break in, and we'll keep the conversation rolling on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back. Shout out to the YouTube chat for putting up with people still complaining about election fraud in 2020 and 2026. Floyd saying, I've started a drinking game. Every time he says something meaningful, I take a shot at tequila. By 11 a.m., I will be 2 sheets to the wind. Right on. I appreciate the compliment, I think. although I guess it is Friday. You know what? You've got my blessing. Go ahead and get drunk. Again, I had a very scary clown dream which woke me up at 2:45 in the morning today. So I'm struggling to take things seriously. I woke up in a panic sweat. Like seriously, picture you're at the front of a dark movie theater and you got a key ring with 500 keys on it, and like the Requiem for a Dream music is playing, and you're looking behind you and there's like slowly shuffling clowns making their way to the front of the theater, and you're there rapid firing trying to make your way through all the keys that you have. And then I just woke up in a panicked cold sweat, and I was like, well, I'm not going back to bed. That was objectively terrifying, and that's how my day started. So these are the kind of shows you get when I have one of those kind of days. So drink up, Floyd. Just please don't get on the road. Or if you're at work, don't let your boss know that I approved this message. I did not. Egg Roll's asking if I'm single. I am. Thank you. Thank you. That's flattering. I just got a shot in the arm there. All right, Doug. I love you, buddy. Doug listens in Meadville, PA. He was talking about my debt and deficit comments, and he says, is it okay to mortgage our youth's future for social programs? And like, it's fundamentally mind-blowing to me that, and Doug listens to the show regularly, but how can I, just last segment, say we are blowing a multi-trillion-dollar hole in our budget explicitly to give a tax cut to billionaires? And what makes you angry is that the social programs that we built in the 30s and 40s that objectively blew no hole in the debt and deficit are the things that are holding us back. Go look, Doug, at a chart for the debt and deficit spending, and it realistically does not blow up until the late 80s and early 90s because of Reaganomics, and then eventually starting forever wars nonstop in different places all over the country. So if you're genuinely worried about debt and deficit spending, it is not a matter of the social programs. It's a matter of starting pointless wars in Iran and passing the billionaire kiss ass bill. It has nothing to do with single mothers collecting food stamps. So, like, we got to wake up to this reality. And you say, tax Elon, just stop deficit spending. The deficit spending occurs because the revenues are being reduced, not because we're blowing the money out. And don't get me wrong, Doge is a good idea, but let's apply Doge to the $60 to $80 billion in annual Medicare Advantage fraud instead of aiming it at these milquetoast transgenic mice solutions. Let's aim it at the Defense Department that hasn't passed an audit in the last, thank you, as Robin says on the TikTok line, says $1.5 trillion defense budget. Not only is it a $1.5 trillion defense budget, they have not passed an audit in the last 8 years. Tom Tiffany is running for governor in the state of Wisconsin on the idea that he is going to be the auditor-in-chief as governor. He's going to find all the waste, fraud, and abuse and all these social programs. Meanwhile, the Defense Department has not passed an audit the entire time he has been in office, and he has not made a single peep about being concerned about continuously raising the budget for the Defense Department year over year, all in the name of starting pointless wars that I think a larger and larger percentage of people are waking up to the fact do nothing about our security. Not to say anything about the people that serve in the armed forces, but the brass are absolutely corrupt and funneling money into the hands of 5 or 6 Defense Department companies that probably need to be audited to hell and back, but they aren't. And so when people tell me they're nervous about debt and deficit spending, or they're nervous about entitlement programs and refuse to acknowledge the obvious elephant in the room, no pun intended, it's hard for me to take them seriously, because clearly it's not the debt and deficit that bothers you. It's the fact that you think your hard-earned tax dollars are going to people that aren't working, despite the fact you listen to a show every day that highlights that a certain percentage of Walmart employees that work full-time are still on food stamps because the multi-billionaire Walton family that just got a massive tax cut that allegedly was supposed to trickle down on us don't pay their employees enough to not not be on food stamps. And now they have to means test for food stamps to prove that they are working 40 hours and not making enough. You're never questioning the fact that they need food stamps in order to make life live. You're questioning the why food stamps need to exist in general. And all I have to say is maybe look inward. I know it's hard to rework things that you've kind of built your political personality on. The guy I used to produce for was moderately right wing. And he used to tell me that CNN and MSNBC were just as bad as Fox, like back in 2017, 2018. I'm like, bro, get out of here. What are you talking about? Fox News is so obviously flagrantly false, whereas CNN and MSNBC are trying to get the news out there and no one trusts them. I was naive and dumb, and he keep telling me this. And I'd be like, dude, stop saying that. And he slowly watched me learn because I kept an open mind and kept trying to learn as I progressed in this career. And eventually I just wake up. I'm like, oh, son of a gun. Russiagate was kind of made up, wasn't it? Oh, son of a gun. You guys are telling me nothing's happening in Gaza right now? It kind of feels like there's a pretty big story happening over there that you guys are just kind of glossing over. And he would oftentimes laugh as I peeled back the layers, and he would say, I'm so excited watching you grow as disenchanted with the national news media as I have been for the last 30 years. It's rough to wake up to, but you need to acknowledge where both of these parties are. Now, he still has his shortcomings. I obviously still have mine as well. But you got to peel back those layers and stop digging in on stuff that you've probably thought for decades at this point that just flat out aren't based in reality. Jerry says the term honorable is part of certain public officials' titles. It doesn't, where'd it go? It doesn't mean that the speaker thinks that they are actually honorable. Sure, I get that, but I feel like in terms of just definitionally and the way that we're kind of wired to think, I think it's kind of hard to separate the two. DSL says all these now underfunded agencies were barely doing anything positive for people anyway while fully funded, so I'm not really following. But like I've told you from the beginning, every institution is so corrupt, we need to burn it all down and start over. It's funny, that was actually the theme. I did my first TikTok live at night yesterday from 7:45 to like 9:15. And that was kind of, we talked about how people get to that line of thinking, DSL, and you're definitely not alone, realistically, to a certain extent, even in the minority. But I will say the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau kicked ass. The National Labor Relations Board kicked ass. Those were good things that were doing things, making sure that workers weren't being exploited, that customers weren't being exploited. And those have now been torn down over the course of the last 15 months. And you're only going to feel it more and more as these companies continue to consolidate and really don't have to win a lot of your business anymore, because where are you going to go? The Delta CEO can go up in front of the earnings calls and state publicly, I have no intention of lowering the prices even if the oil and gas prices go down, because what are you going to do? Drive? You're going to drive to Europe? You're going to drive from Wisconsin to Mexico? Like, probably not. You're going to fly, and you only have 3 choices. So they can tell you, we're going to fleece you. They can tell you, we're not going to give you the services you offered. We might make your seats narrower. We might make you stand if you're in the back. But where are you going to go? What's your second option? How are you going to combat this? That's kind of where we're at. That's what those agencies were supposed to do. I'm not saying that they all have to stay. You and I are both on the same page that there's a lot of horse crap out there that's got to go. But I would argue the flagrantly obvious stuff that needs to go is always what gets ignored. Like, you can't complain to me about these cancer treatments that aren't curing cancer fast enough, I guess, in the minds of some people that are okay with their removal, but you're fine with a multi-billion, $100 billion institution not being able to pass an audit for the better part of a decade, or even be able to account for over 50% of their assets. And that's not on anybody's radar that claims to care about debt and deficit spending. Like, eventually these arguments tend to collapse in on themselves, and that needs to be acknowledged. Larry says news and politicians like to kick the can down the road. Many MAGAs think that way, that it's tear down and start over. No, of course it is, because again, a lot of MAGA voters come from rural areas. And as I've always stated, I graduated from college in 2010 in the middle of a recession. And a lot of people got laid off then. It was hard to find jobs at first, but not because they weren't available, but because 22-year-olds were forced to compete with people that were in their 40s and 50s on job applications that said we want 5 years experience for a job that might pay $32,000 a year. But people in their 40s and 50s were jumping at the chance to get it because everybody was laid off, and they were just trying to find any kind of income to make sure that they didn't join the population of people that lost their house. Living in Pittsburgh, I had opportunities. I was able to get off the ground. If I were in a rural area where the whole town was based on the lumber mill, or the whole town was based on the meat packing plant, and then that facility closed down, and Democrats didn't even take the time to show up in your state, let alone your town, I understand where the attitude towards tear the whole system down and start over stems from. And then for Democrats to have the audacity to label everybody talking that way as racist, I get it. I get why so many people feel that way. And I'm here to tell you, Larry, MAGA feels that way, but so do a lot of progressives as well. There's a reason why Graham Plattner can get caught with a Totenkopf tattoo, a Nazi tattoo, and nobody cared. The guy's pulling 40 points ahead of Susan Collins Janet Mills, because, yeah, that was a questionable decision. It seems like he's grown since then. And you know what? He said money should be spent building hospitals in America and not blowing up hospitals in Gaza, something that both Democrats and Republicans, by and large, struggle saying. So you know what? He's got character flaws. I'm willing to vote for him. And if he fails, that's a risk I'm willing to take. Same idea with Trump's tariffs. Same idea with Bernie Sanders. Same idea with AOC. The list goes on. And John Alton Appleton said AOC for president in his comments. These are the kind of messages that resonate. I'm pushing up against it here. I've got a ton of people in all of my chats commenting. I'll keep this conversation rolling throughout the commercial break here, and we'll be back in a little bit of a longer break here. I kind of stretched it out, but we got plenty more to do, so stay where you are. This is Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back outside the box. Ben Cominos, WHBY, and on the Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we spent an hour talking about a couple of different topics that kind of all intertwined with one another. The growing gas prices, DEI policies at Disney, the concept of our debt encompassing our GDP for the first time since World War II, and how it is that we got there relevant to what was taking place in the 40s and how we got out of it in the 40s relative to today. It was all fascinating and all very well attended across all of the different media platforms that this show is carried on now at this point, as I continue trying to spin the 57 plates that I do here. And again, for those of you that have TikTok or don't and should definitely download it, I also do evening shows where I'm a lot more interactive with the TikTok during the program as well. I just tried it for my first time yesterday with regular interactor with the show Anna, and we had a very good time. And she's going to be a recurring guest on Thursdays, but I'll be doing that Monday through Thursdays if you enjoy it. We still have a whole lot that I want to get into here, though. And as I mentioned, we do have a guest coming in right around 10:30, trying to get the Labor Party off the ground here in Northeast Wisconsin, since it is May Day and a big focus on unions. And somebody came at me about unions in the TikTok chat. And so those of you listening on the radio know I got a thing or two here about what I have to say there. Oh man, Lady Jane emailing for the first time ever, but I am not wasting my time reading all that right now. I would like to get into a little bit more of a higher level conversation here with a lot of you guys that I think you're going to find interesting. The past 2 days. Oh, shoot. You know what? Before we do that, I would like to highlight, because Ben asked me, and I do think it's a valid question, and I'd like to share this with you before I move on, because I'd like to say this publicly, because I think it's important to do these kind of things to kind of bridge the gaps here across the two sides of the political aisle. I was mentioning Graham Plattner, the Senate candidate in Maine, who just essentially has been declared the presumptive nominee, with Janet Mills suspending her campaign. Let's forget about the fact, like, how much money did the Democratic Party waste? Like, you could have opened soup kitchens and labeled it the Democratic Soup Kitchens rather than put this objectively unpopular candidate up there to run against the obviously popular candidate because you were nervous he was going to tax the rich and stop funding the military-industrial complex. But conversation for another time. I talked about how he got caught with a Totenkopf tattoo on his chest, and it really didn't scare too many people away from him. Realistically, there's a report coming out right now, because now that he is the Democratic nominee, if you watch the national news, it's almost exclusively positive coverage about him now. It's actually disgusting how it basically turned on a dime. And they bring people on TV now who say, I questioned 30 people about the tattoo. He says, I was going out of my way to get a soundbite saying that they abandoned him. Even though they like his policies, they didn't like that he had the tattoo. He says, I questioned 30 people on the street, and 30 people said, well, it was definitely an error in judgment when he was younger, but it seems as though he's evolved and grown over time, and I don't hold it against him. And I really do think that what he's trying to do for the working class is worlds better than trying to get him on this moment. To which Ben asked me, in the text line here, the WHBY text line, if a Republican had a Nazi tattoo and said that they didn't know, would you overlook it? Get real, man. You are lying. Now, I did do a segment about this when the story broke, where I was wondering if a Republican got caught with this, and then he was asked to go on Tucker Carlson, and he was like, yeah, I didn't know this was a tattoo. Now, if it's a swastika, that's one thing. But, like, this was a Totenkopf. Like, I'll be real, I had never heard of it until this scandal. Like, it looked like a skull and crossbones. Fun fact, I love the movie Inglourious Bastards, and the movie, the main antagonist of the villain, played by Christoph Waltz, has the Totenkopf on the golden symbol on the front of his hat. I've seen that movie no less than 10 times. Never noticed that was the insignia on the hat. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's as common knowledge as, like, the SS and the obvious things. But so Ben asked me that, and I would like to read to you how I responded to him, because I think it's important for us to kind of think this way, because I kind of talked about the burn it down attitude of Trump supporters, specifically in rural areas. And I'd like to double down on that here. I said, this experience has opened me up to that exact reality. I did a segment on it when the story broke. As long as he carried himself as reformed and wasn't making 1488 posts or crap like that, I would support that Republican. And more importantly, it helped me understand Trump better, because I believe that Plattner actually does mean business, and I'm willing to overlook his character flaws as a result of that fact. And when I realized that about myself, it helped me realize why, even though I believe Donald Trump is not making things better, and I question that he ever had the intention of making things better, but that's a matter of opinion. It helped me understand why people are able to overlook the flaws of an individual when you believe that he is going to empirically make life better. And being able to say that out loud and embrace that reality, I think, is necessary to not only show growth, but show that we are all human and capable of understanding that these differences exist and that we're willing to make changes for them in ourselves. I say all that to say I appreciate the comment, and I hope that when I say that, people actually believe me when I say it. As Anna says, I'm consistently unlearning things and realizing white privileges that were certainly not taught, and I think that's an important reality to embrace as well. I talk about it all the time on this show. I voted for Obama in 2008, and when I was a recent college grad and couldn't get hired, I was like, why are we still talking about racism? I helped end racism in 2008. It's 2010. Why are we still dealing with this? And like, that's a stupid thing to think. But when life has you on the ropes, when you're on the down and outs, when you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this moment, it's easy to have these kind of faults in your logic. As long as you're willing to appreciate what other people are saying and thinking and trying to grow with that, well, that's all we can really ask for as humans. And so I appreciate the question and comment there, because I think it gives a reason to kind of to develop, to learn, to grow, which makes us all better. So there's a chance some of you got mad at that statement there, and I'm okay with it. All right. I have 15 minutes before my guest hits here, and I'm going to do this, dang it, because it's worth it. Pete Hegseth has been making a fool out of himself in front of both the House and Senate, not willing to answer some very basic questions about the war in Iran. It's very clear to me that between the Epstein files and this uniquely unpopular war, and when I say uniquely, it's because it took years to get to this level of unpopularity with Vietnam and the war on terror and all these other factors. It took us 2 months to get here now because nobody is asking for this. Nobody wants to see this happen. So I think that's worth that's why he was so defensive in those hearings. And I did a segment yesterday about media training, and you could tell that this guy worked on the national scene and was willing to have to hold his own, in quote fingers, with the people that were grilling him. And when I say hold his own, just pivot and not really answer any of the questions. But the reason he's doing so is because people want to see this war come to an end. They want to get people on the books for having voted for this war. The War Powers Act allows the president 60 days to not need to go to Congress for these kind of actions. And Lord knows Donald Trump is not the first person to use the War Powers Act. Realistically, most presidents do it. As I always state with this Iran war, it's not that it's uniquely Trumpian. The uniquely Trumpian part about it is that, like, there genuinely was no effort to even convince us that this was necessary. It was just like, shut up. Make America great again. Everybody root for me. And sure enough, 4 out of 5 people that voted for him absolutely fell in line. But the question has come up about the debate of the War Powers Act. And I'm here to tell you right now, unfortunately, there's nothing set in stone in regards to how they're going to get out of this. Pete Hegseth is making the argument that because we're in the middle of a ceasefire, that clock has stopped. The 60-day clock is no longer relevant because as we are reaching the beginning of May, we have hit the 2-month period of this apparently 2-week war that has approached 2 months. Something's telling me we might get a new healthcare plan before we actually get an end to this war, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Here's the frustrating part for all of you guys that you're not going to be happy about what I have to say. there's no real clear-cut answer to whether or not this ceasefire is impacting the War Powers Act or not. And given the fact that it's not clear-cut, there's absolutely nothing that's going to be done about it. So you can be frustrated. No one's more anti-war in this audience than I am. If there's one thing I've learned, it's easy to be anti-war. It's very difficult to be anti-war when the person you voted for is in office. It takes a certain kind of person. I promise you, I am against this war. But given what we have seen with the flagrant corruption and abuses and law breaking and all these other factors that go into this conversation, when it's clear cut that this stuff is happening, right? When there's actual ambiguity, there isn't anything that we can do about it. Now, I do have happier news in a different industry that I want to bring to you, but we do have a call here about, I'm assuming, the War Powers Act. So we'll do that first. And then I want to pivot to pharmaceutical costs before we bring our guest into the studio here. So let's see who we have here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Cynthia. Cynthia, Florida. Another one of our ships caught on fire. The USS Higgins.
I didn't.
I've said before. Well, and matter of fact, the first report, it was sabotage when they were clogging up the toilets on the fort.
Oh yeah.
And so now a fire. There's a revolt in the military. They're mad that their top brass was fired for daring to have different opinions, and these people respected those men. They don't respect headsets. So I'll let you guys go on that one.
Always good to hear from you, Cynthia. I think that was a perfect way to end it. Thank you on a Friday here. This is being chased by clowns kind of Friday, and I'm here for it. Yeah, it's not going anywhere anytime soon, which is very unfortunate. Whoa, Jaro Manny, I'm going to have to look into that. I saw her say apparently there's someone running a write-in campaign in Maine for the Democratic side. I will look into that and get to the bottom of that, but that is very intriguing. I do want to end on some good news here before we bring the guest in. Well, not good news, but the potential for good news if we actually had a government that meant business for, any stretch of time here. As we all know, and we've been talking about healthcare costs, I got a very good call yesterday from a Trump supporter who says, he tried to get rid of Obamacare, and we were kind of going back and forth. I did my line about how Democrats make it hard to be middle class, Republicans make it hard to be poor, nobody makes it hard to be rich, and how while Obamacare absolutely has its flaws, it also allows for millions of Americans with medical history to be able to have access to affordable healthcare, and it should be a question of how do we cheapen it from there. It's an interesting fact that we actually had laws on the books up until Clinton. And always keep in mind that centrist libs always hold Clinton up as the standard of this is what Democrats should aspire to be when they worked across the aisle and cut freaking regulations on banks and apparently in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And changed the rules where prior to Clinton's administration, if American tax dollars, which is something I talk about with you regularly, if American tax dollars go into the R&D of a drug, then in order for these people to be able to get tax benefits from the government, they need to be offering them to us at a price that is comparable to what is going on overseas and in other industrialized nations. The Clinton administration rolled it back, but fun fact, Senator Wellstone actually proposed legislation that would roll this back and actually make it so if R&D funds are applied with American tax dollars, you are no longer allowed to gouge us on the purchasing side. And for those of you that are newer to the program or might not know this, since 2010, every single drug that has been created has American tax dollars backing it. And since 2000, the percentage is 94% of all drugs. I don't have it in front of me, but a large number of drugs are created. So we socialize the development part, and then the pharmaceutical companies say, okay, good, now we're going to gouge you on the other side for the privilege. What, did you think it was cheap for us to take your money and make these drugs? So I want to read directly from the thing here now. Wellstone told the Senate his bill would not change the current system of research tax credits at all unless drug companies refuse to fairly price their U.S. products. He referred to studies done by the House Government Reform Committee showing that prescription drug prices in the United States are generally twice those of Canada and other industrialized nations. There's something wrong with a system that gives drug companies huge tax breaks while allowing them to price gouge seniors. He said companion legislation was introduced in the House HR bill in the Ways and Means Committee. It would deny tax benefits for research conducted by pharmaceutical companies where U.S. consumers pay higher prices for the products of the research than consumers in other developed countries. Now, as you guys have gotten to know me well, typically when I present these straightforward stories that there really shouldn't be any pushback to, you always have to anticipate the other shoe dropping, and this is no different than any of those other stories, because some of you may have noticed that I'm talking about Senator Paul Wellstone, and like you're sitting there, I follow politics pretty well, and I don't know who Paul Wellstone is. What state is that? Well, he was the senator in Minnesota, but that was back in the year 2000. He proposed this bill back in the year 2000, and it wasn't brought up for a vote, and has been laying in anguish since 2000 without anybody having the guts to actually bring it to the floor. The only reason I know about this is I'm a subscriber to the news publication Lever News, which does fantastic investigative journalism looking up this kind of stuff, and it helps keep me informed about what's going on. But this was proposed in 2000, and nobody has brought it up for 26 years. As we watch ourselves get gouged day in and day out for the cost of drugs, there is a solution, not on the books, but available. The exact same verbiage could be brought up today, and I'm interested what percentage of Americans would be against this idea, because I am absolutely in favor of my tax dollars going to R&D, going to these kind of programs in order to make sure that these drugs are invented. But as is often the case in this wonderful country of ours, you do not get to socialize the R&D and then capitalize on the losses or the profits. You do not get to socialize the losses and then capitalize the gains, as so many of these companies seem want to do, regardless of the breakdown of politics in that moment. Complete Republican control, complete Democrat control, and everywhere in between. Louisiana in the Supreme Court worked to gut the Voting Rights Act yesterday, and the black communities everywhere are very angry. My social media feeds have been filled with blue MAGA liberals blaming the left for not voting for Kamala Harris despite being a uniquely unpopular candidate, saying that it's because of them that this bill was not able to be codified or guaranteed that it would still exist on the books. Meanwhile, you can go back to 2021 and find a Hill article, which I actually took the time to do. The honest-to-God answer is I don't know whether we can get this done, Biden said after leaving a more than hour-long meeting with Senate Democrats to persuade them to change the Senate rules. I hope we can get this done, but I'm not sure we can. This was in an effort to save the Voting Rights Act, and while the Democrats had a trifecta in government, they weren't able to get it done, and now those same liberals are yelling at progressives for not pretending Kamala Harris's campaign wasn't perfect here. Meanwhile, they didn't get it done when they had the opportunity to do so. It's the same concept as the drug bill. It's the same concept as enforcing the War Powers Act. Not necessarily this time. They don't have a trifecta this time, but Republicans do. And inevitably, they are going to run it up the flagpole when a liberal president decides to act like a war criminal, because it will happen. I have no faith that this system is going to fix itself in the 2020s. I'm just going to be real with you. These issues are out there, and they are buried under mountains of BS. When we have 24-hour news networks talking about Jim Comey and Hassam Piker 24 hours a day, this stuff gets ignored and thrown to the wayside, and I do not think that is a coincidence. But there are answers to these problems that exist. You just need the people in place that actually want to do it. And I think that's a good place to end the solo portion of this program. I'm about to go and get my guest, and I think you guys will be very interested in the conversation that she and I are about to have. Her name is Haley Hauer. She is trying to get the Labor Party off the ground here in Northeast Wisconsin. It is a third party candidate that I think you guys will be interested in hearing in, given that it is May Day and unions are on everybody's mind. So I'm going to go to commercial break. I'm going to run up to the front and go grab her, and we're going to finish the second half hour of the show having this conversation with her about what they stand for, what their platform is, and where we can kind of go from there. I think this should be interesting for a lot of people listening. So we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, WHBY, Friday edition, May Day edition, just about to cruise into a weekend that I so sorely need. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time here. For those of you watching on the video stream, you're going to hear the disenchanted voice of Haley Hauer. She is here with an interesting proposition, trying to get a third party off the ground that does not exist in Northeast Wisconsin, that has a pretty interesting insight into how it is that we can possibly provide some new pushback to the two-party system here. We have the Green Party here in Wisconsin, and I will be working to get their representation on the program as well down the line. But thematically, with it being May Day, it just happens to make sense that this would be the kind of day that we would do something like this. So without further ado, Haley Hauer in the Myron Construction Studio, how are you this fine Friday morning?
Very well, thanks, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I full disclosure, I went and watched Haley actually kind of give a rundown about what the Labor Party kind of stood for at an event at Tardigrade back in a couple weeks ago here. And as Anna likes to remind me, and I appreciate the reminder there, not everyone may remember May Day, and that's actually where we're going to start with this conversation here with Haley. I've been talking about it all week. May Day is May 1st. There's a reason why I want the Labor Party on my show on May 1st. And I thought maybe you might be able to provide a little bit of insight into why it is that I thought that this kind of resonated well with what this show's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just kind of going back, a just brief overview of what May Day is and its importance. So May Day started in the 1880s when there were labor strikes happening across the nation, specifically in the Midwest, for the 8-hour workday. And during this time, there was a significant event, the Haymarket Affair, in which officers fired on the strikers, which spurred a police brutality protest, and then a bomb went off, which killed about 8 officers and civilians as well. And then during that time, we also had the Bayview massacre, in which strikers were also fired upon. And so May Day itself became just kind of a memorial, holiday. But its, significance today, I think, is just a really strong reminder that, the 8-hour day, the weekend, a lot of these victories that we have right now, even civil rights and marriage equality, they didn't come from working within the established system that we have right now. They were independent movements, mass mobilization, and they came from, or I guess these victories came from putting enough pressure on the established parties to force them to respond. And so, we still have a lot of work to do. And it is just a good reminder of the change that we can make when we come together.
Yeah, I received a message on one of my chats here today that was blaming unions for the cost of living crisis and how expensive everything is today, and saying, well, if it weren't for these unions, maybe you wouldn't be talking about this cost. And on all days to say something like that, to say it on May Day, it really goes to show you the loss of history. And I don't think it's any coincidence, because I don't know. I know you've been kind of all over the country here, but where I went to school, we did not learn about this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? This isn't necessarily taught in schools regularly. So you kind of have to look this information up on your own, which is a probably a pretty big issue in terms of finding access to why it is that unions matter, even when you might get frustrated with them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that's very intentional as well, too. Even Labor Day itself in September was created to try to draw attention away from May Day and to make, labor movements seem a little bit softer and not as threatening, because May Day pretty much showed what can happen when these movements do amass power. So I agree. There isn't enough attention or focus on this. And I do think that's very intentional just in our education system.
Right. It's almost like learning about the Tulsa massacre, because I'm watching the freaking Watchmen TV show on HBO. Like, I'm sitting there in my 30s, like, wait a minute, how did I not know this was a thing until right now? And so many other issues like that. And I don't think that's by accident at all. So let's get into the politics of this and how it all kind of relates. The Labor Party. We do not have one in Northeast Wisconsin. That's where you come in. And it's a hell of a responsibility to try and get this off the ground here, but maybe fill people in a little bit on what they represent. You're on Outside the Box. We're frustrated as an audience here about what the two-party system kind of allows for us to do, what kind of options it gives us, and this is just another option, albeit not taken seriously yet, but that can change. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you guys represent.
Absolutely. So the Labor Party, we do have members in about 50 states. I think right now we have about 5 active states, and that's just kind of part of an activation plan that is based off of what each state's requirements are to become an official political party. The Labor Party is class-centric. We are entirely worker-led. We have unions built into our structure. We are explicitly anti-corporate. And, we have this, I guess, idea of unifying these progressive movements with electoral infrastructure and independent political power. But really, I think like what sets us apart from, other political parties, even though we might have some overlapping values or ideals with like, DSA or the Green Party in some ways, is that we are attacking the nation's power dynamic itself of domination, rugged individualism, separation. And I think that by attacking, the system itself, we have an opportunity to unify people from different political ideologies in a way that other political parties don't have space for right now. And we have an opportunity to bridge that divide even a little bit and come together kind of with this like singular purpose of, disrupting the like chokehold that the wealthy elite have over our nation. And that's going to affect and change a lot of things for a lot of people. So Wisconsin is like one of the most active states that's up and running in the party right now. Our goal is to have electoral ballot access in 2028. To do that, we're going to need either 35,000 signatures, or we need to put forth a candidate that wins 1% of the vote in a statewide election. So like our big ask right now is really just spreading the word, letting people know we're here, letting them know we're an option, encouraging member signups, and encouraging people to get involved so that when the time comes that we're starting to act on that plan, we have the support that we need to make us official. So we do have a platform as well. If you go to votelabor.org, they have the national platform that, we have created within Wisconsin, kind of our own platform as well too. A lot of it is based off of the national platform, but we've specified things to either like Wisconsin specific issues or, of course, like the state itself isn't going to deal in, foreign affairs as much. So we just kind of edit it a little bit, but we created this platform based on what we think are just like basic human rights. So we have sections, for a job, democratic representation, housing, food and clean water, unions, healthcare, a livable planet, economic and social justice, education. And right now at this stage, we kind of see ourselves at the crossroads of like community and politics. And so we are partnering with other organizers and other movements and really just trying to kind of fill that space in that political world a little bit too of like, what can we do to help with, legislation or advocate to local officials. And just kind of make the change from there.
I think what you're saying there probably resonates with a lot of people listening right now. And again, we're speaking with Haley Hauer of the Labor Party here. I'll just be real with you though, and I'm sure I'm not breaking any news to you here that you're unaware of. But like, let's just use 2024 as an example. When RFK Jr. was running as an independent, the Republican Party or excuse me, the Democratic Party wanted to keep him off the ballot because they were nervous that some people that might vote for their candidate would end up voting for RFK Jr. And then once he dropped out and announced his endorsement of Donald Trump, the same Liberal Party was there to make sure that he could not get off the ballot so that some people that might vote for Donald Trump would vote for RFK Jr. There are hurdles thrust in front of third-party candidates since their existence. The two-party system that I believe and a lot of people believe is failing us definitely has a system in place to kind of make you jump through hoops here in order to make things happen here. So what kind of hurdles are you running into in your effort to kind of mainstream this party and get the word out there and achieve the kind of not even power, just access to the levers to possibly achieve power at some time? What kind of hurdles exist there?
Of course. So right now we are at such an early stage that we, like ourselves within, our own group, are not running into that issue just yet. But I completely agree. Like, we are aware that that's going to exist. What I really think, um, we all know this two-party system is not working. And this was, I think, one of the things that drew me most to the Labor Party is seeing the opportunity for this new space. I mean, this is something that we're building from scratch, and it is something unlike, any other party that we have in our nation right now, in the sense that I do believe we have an opportunity to have some of those more difficult conversations with people whose opinions, are different from our own. But I think that there's a way that we can approach that with curiosity. You know, where does this belief come from? What experiences have led you to this? Uh, why do you believe this? And to actually start having conversations, and maybe come to a place of understanding and a place of moving forward together. Because I agree that as long as we are so divided, as long as it is, us against them, and all of these assumptions and generalizations that we make, uh, of who somebody is, what their values are, you know, what their goals are, what they're going to do, we're really stuck. And it's just gonna be like this ping pong game back and forth, until we really find a way to move past that and, yeah, have some difficult conversations, but to be able to move forward together. And I do think this is a place that can happen. I don't think that's going to be easy by any means, but I think it's possible. And maybe I'm being optimistic, but I can tell you, it feels really good to be optimistic about something right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, isn't that the truth? You're talking to a guy that woke up from a nightmare where I was being chased by clowns in a movie theater. So I'm in a very pessimistic point of view these days. So we got a couple of comments here. David, who is actually running for the state assembly in the 5th district with the Green Party, says, I'm a big fan of the Labor Party. Talking with them and the possibilities of working together feels real, which is awesome. Angelo says, no mention of May Day in my page-a-day calendar, which I'm sure doesn't come as a shock to you at all. On my YouTube chat, though, we have Old Lib, who obviously is exactly what he has described that. He's a liberal there, big-time union guy. And I'm interested if you have some thoughts on this here, Haley. He says, Republicans hate unions. Won't this split the vote and ultimately end up helping Republicans? What are your thoughts when you hear those kind of remarks?
I think that is, it's a very good point to bring up. And yeah, that's a very valid concern. Pretty much since World War One, there's been, an extreme amount of propaganda, especially concerning unions. And I think that if we really want to see a rise in unions again, too, we need to, yes, definitely start talking about them more, but we also need to start changing that narrative. And I think we need to start showing, the power and possibility of what unions can do. Because, of course, Republicans are scared by them. Like, it's people power. And that's, they don't want their power being checked right now. But I think that if we can show this more to people, because I don't think unions are a big part of the conversation. I think just on a regular basis, with the majority of people. And I think if we were able to kind of show people what that possibility is, I think just it's going to come from new conversations with new perspectives to be able to kind of make that change or see some movement there. But it is a valid concern. It's going to be something we're going to have to work on. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern as well, and I appreciate the comment there. I think that was a good question to ask. Joe Manny saying, not surprising, but May Day is not on my Google Calendar either, and Google doesn't seem to have a special landing page graphic for it. It's none of this is by accident. At least I'm convinced. You guys know me; I'm a bit conspiracy brained, but I make it work for me. I'll tell you what, we have to squeeze one final break in here, but I'm not speaking with Haley. This is Haley Hauer with the Labor Party, trying to get them off the ground here in Northeast Wisconsin. She's going to stick around with me during the break as we squeeze in one final break and do the last segment of the week here of Outside the Box. So please do stay tuned, and we'll be back in a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. All right, we're only going to have a couple of minutes left here before we call it a show, but I do want to jump into one final question here with our guest in the Myron Construction studio, Haley Hauer, representative with the Labor Party. Haley, we've been talking about May Day. We've been talking about what the Labor Party represents, and we're talking about some potential hurdles or conflicts down the line here as it begins to gain a little bit of traction. But let's focus on the here and now. It is May Day today, and while it is a day of remembrance, it also is a day of action as well. And there's a couple of things going on that I think if the listeners don't have anything going on in their world today, that they might be interested in taking part in. So the floor is yours. What's going on here?
Absolutely. So this evening at 6 p.m. at the Green Bay Labor Temple, the Labor Party is co-hosting with the Northeast Wisconsin DSA for a gathering to hear from local labor leaders, meet with other organizers, and just have some shared meals and some shared food. So that's definitely, if you would like more information from us or to get to know us better, that would be a great event to attend. This Sunday is the Bayview Massacre Memorial March in Milwaukee. That's kind of also a really fantastic event. I'll be there as well with some other organizers too. So that would be another thing to check out. And if you would just like some more information from the Labor Party as well, you can either go to votelabor.org. You can find us on social media. Outagamie County chapter has a meeting Wednesday, May 20th at 5 p.m. at Tardigrades as well, and you can check us out then.
Yeah, plenty of opportunities there. And again, that website is votelabor.org. Plenty of easily searchable information there as well. Definitely a busy day. And I mean, it's an exciting time, but there's also, that element of why the day even has to exist in the first place. And the fact that we sometimes forget as enough time goes by. Hell, we're learning it with tariffs right now. If enough time goes by, you kind of forget about how it is that we got there to begin with. And it's days like today and organizations like yours that kind of help people to remember that kind of thing. So, Haley Hauer, thank you for being here. Definitely some interesting information, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we're chatting about this kind of stuff. So thank you and enjoy the day today. You don't have to whisper it.
Thank you.
Of course. All right. And with that, guys, we do have to put a pin in the show here today. Shout out to Robin, who says they're impressed with the show. That I'm very knowledgeable. I second that opinion. And if you guys didn't get a chance to listen to the entire program, please do consider downloading the WHBY app. All you have to do is search WHBY in Google Play or in the App Store. It is free, easy to use, and the best part is every single episode of Outside the Box is available there, as well as every other program that is on WHBY airwaves. And in my personal life, I also have the Ben Comino's YouTube page. All you got to do is type my name in. Every subscriber helps out. I have a speech up there from my event at the 7th District Congressional Dems. If you haven't watched it yet, getting a ton of positive feedback in my personal life there. And, of course, follow me on TikTok and Facebook as well. That does it for me here. I'm going to go call it a weekend, and geez, oh, man, do I need it. Haley's up next, and we'll talk to you on Monday.